Hello, welcome to Simply Sacred, a loving gaze at the inner world in a modern society. I'm your host, Aurora Leigh, and with us, as always, is your co-host, Kaja Gjesdal.
Hello, hello.
Today, we're talking about the parameters and the juiciness of our podcast and why it exists and what four principles we are steering this podcast with. So we're going to be describing that container to you.
A sacred container.
Yeah, and why is a sacred container important, Kaja?
Safety, feeling loved and feeling safe to share. So important, especially these days.
Part of that, like, kind of psychological safety where people know what to expect and they can enter that pathway with you, or
Yeah, I think like sharing what our inner world is out into society and being vulnerable, being able to be vulnerable and being able to be very clear. Clarity is very important.
I don't know for you, but for myself, I have been in spaces where they did not have a psychologically safe container and they were guiding people in their thoughts and consciousnesses, and actually sometimes even plant medicine, and they weren't actually skilled and equipped enough to hold that container well. And I've experienced that, and I think it gave me profound learning, and I was able to recognize it as it was happening. When I was a lot younger, I may not have been, and when I first started yoga teacher training and stuff like that, I was very young, and I know the difference between a well-held container and one that is not. What about you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like for sure I've had experiences too in spaces, sacred spaces, well, spaces that were a healing container and I didn't feel supported enough and I felt like I spiraled actually once out of one. And yeah, yeah, no, it's so important.
It's interesting because a lot of people are talking about things now, and even with social media, a lot is shared and a lot of deep things can be shared, and profound things that one would actually maybe sit with for a long time, just that with that concept, and let it integrate into their world and into their mind. But they're scrolling through it very fast going, oh yeah, that resonates, but they're not really integrating it. But we have a world that's built on this, like, exploration that this podcast is all about, I think. But maybe there isn't the riverbanks to help flow that conversation. And I think that this is what this podcast is here for, and our conscious conversations are here for. So that leads us to principle number one, which is modeling and normalizing conscious conversations.
Yeah, I think and having difficult, challenging conversations sometimes with love and being able to feel like you can say something that's really been uncomfortable that you've, maybe never been able to share, and then sharing it with like basically the world when you do it on a platform like this, right? Yeah, it takes
Well,
courage. I
it
have to say
does
that.
take courage. I think that a lot of people have a natural ability to stop and know their threshold where they personally won't feel unsafe. And you would never want someone to go and force past a threshold that matters for them for their own personal safety, because they'd be too triggered after. So that's part of a safe container too. I think that recognizing that and knowing that people usually have a wisdom of knowing where to get to and stop at. But sometimes those with some deep traumas, they don't actually have that ability to regulate themselves. So safe containers also help people navigate that so they don't go too far off. And so that's a big part of the conversation too, I think, a big
Yeah,
piece.
and then I shared that too, that we had that kind of space in one of our communities, and I felt like we needed to have afterwards because there was someone that got really triggered once, that we had like a space afterwards to just share even more so that that person wasn't like going into back into society with like, feeling like things have been brought up to the surface and there was no one to hold that, had that space. So yeah.
And because going into the new year, we're going to be having continual guests coming on and sharing and talking. After the podcast's done, they will be able to sit with us and talk more and for longer in discussion if there's still more integrating that any of us needs to do. Because like our guests, or like everyone else, myself as a host and you as a co-host, we still have our own stuff we're working through.
Oh
So
yeah.
and And that'll be really fun because, we'll be able to model that vulnerability as we do the podcast with our check-ins as well.
Yeah.
And
Need to
so,
see, right?
yeah, I
Platform.
think too, in the political landscape, we also see, people are talking about really important things and including, inclusion and diversity and anti-racism and all these things that have a profound impact on those who they're speaking about. And, I don't really think that any of those leaders and people know how to create a safe container with that on that larger nationwide scale or global scale. And so the importance of a container is really huge.
Yeah, because I think that you're touching on like the sensitivity aspect that we, as humans have been kind of missing, like that we are, emotional beings, and we can't ignore the emotions that we feel when we're in such certain situations or circles. So yeah, I think it's so important.
And that brings us to principle 2 of the podcast, which is providing an accepting environment to explore the inner narratives without social shame, judgment, ridicule, or cancel culture ideologies. And we'll get into cancel culture after, but I think that you're really hitting the nail on the head when it comes to sensitive topics, because we seem to be like divided, where some people think people are too sensitive and others, really believe that you should be able to cancel someone. And so it's very black and white thinking. Triggers are the teaching and the guiding point. And yes, we need to have a safe container when we have deep and meaningful conversations, realizing that real people's lives are connected to stories, connected to things that we're talking about or that people can be talking about. And if my level of understanding goes to a depth that makes someone else uncomfortable, or if something that I say has a different associative meaning, it can bring up stuff for people. But we're not really moving forward as a society if we don't continue past that. If everything gets shut down because it's too much and we don't know how to move past that and create a framework and skills and aptitude and ability to move through that part, because we don't have a common language around things, and we'll get to that in principle 4. But when people are just canceled, it's also not building skills, right?
Totally.
And reframing. And the important thing is to recognize that we are not our social conditioning. We are not our egoic biases. We are us with egoic biases. We are ourselves with social conditioning. We are ourselves with imprinting that can go back 13 generations, a certain belief system that is no longer okay, that is no longer part of our social fabric. And we need to be able to unlearn and relearn those things and realize, oh, what do I want to be? But we can't have that empowerment feeling of, so now what, until we go into that uncomfortable conditioning. And if
Yes.
we point our fingers at each other and socially blame someone for holding that belief, we are shutting the pot lid. So on one hand, we're saying, hey, we want a society that's evolved past these belief systems, but we're not going to actually create a container where it's friendly enough to do that work because it's your fault. Well, no, it's not our fault that our ancestors created social narratives. It's our fault if we continue them.
Yeah.
It's our fault if we keep our head in the sand. It is our responsibility to make aware the things that are below the awareness level. Like, it is our responsibility, especially if you're doing anything that has an impact, it should be done with a highly evolved inner consciousness. We need leaders that have those highly evolved inner consciousnesses so that they're not just recreating a script that's broken and continuing social discordance.
Yeah. And this is like the growth through discomfort, right? Like we have to move through the uncomfortable feelings or conversations to have this growth. And it's not happening fast enough.
Well, because we are mammals and we have a mammalian brain, we model how to do that. And if we aren't able to model how to do that, then it's not like people aren't able to see that that's possible. If what they're seeing modeled is waving their finger and getting mad at one another and controlling how the script goes, then that's what's being modeled and replicated, right? I don't know how to deal with this. This is not okay with me, or that kind of thing, then we're not able to. But I think that because the podcast is on the inner narrative, it creates a skill set for the listener to, in the privacy and safety of their own inner dwelling, to unlearn and relearn and unpack. So it doesn't mean the listener needs to do it socially yet. It means that they're able to, based on our conversations, because maybe we're more used to it, because they are able to dive deep with us, or they're able to go, well, why do I believe what I believe? And so that's the blessing of this podcast. That's the offering and the gift and the medicine to the listener with this podcast.
And the allowing of mistakes to happen sometimes, because we're not perfect. We really have to get out of this like idea of perfection. I'm always going to say the right thing. I'm always going to do the right thing. No, like we're not. And we have to allow that space for those things to happen and give someone another chance. Yeah, of course there's going to be a time maybe where it's like, oh, I've given you a few chances and you really need to go and learn somewhere else. But, yeah.
Well, I'm encouraged of the brave ones who come on here as guests to do this conversation building with us, because, if somebody's scared, oh, in 10 years, someone's going to hear that, I had a prior belief about this and now I don't, then I'll get canceled later on. And I mean, that could be a reality. We can't promise that that won't happen, because we can't control what a social population chooses to do and how they choose to be. But I don't think that it's going to continue. I think cancel culture is shifting, because we do need to get out of that black and white thinking if we're going to move ahead. We are not our thoughts. Our thoughts happen. And so we have to be able to accept ourselves and feel safe to unpack, why that is.
Yeah.
Principle 3 is the most important one in the sense of it's why this podcast started to begin with, which is that it's built on the core belief that the power of love and human connection can restory and rewire current collective and individual trauma, as well as social discordance.
Yeah, and you helped me with that last night. Rewiring a story that I needed to rewire, right? So yeah, thank you for that. And that's exactly what, I know it's going to come up. I know it's going to come up sometimes where it's happening just even as the show is happening.
Yes, because there isn't anyone who isn't currently restoring or on the precipice of restoring or eventually will restory with the common collective, because we as a planet are restoring right now. It's just there hasn't been a roadmap. Some people have them. There's some beautiful spiritual teachers out there. There's some beautiful social scientists out there, but they're all in it too. We are all collectively in it, and we are all equal. It's just some people have gone, okay, I've gone to the depths of how hard this is, and I think that I have something that I can share to help to show that there is a pathway through. And so those are the people that I think will be needed as, time continues. And so human love and connection can and will and be the only thing that remains true, through the pains, through the shifts, through the changes that occur economically, environmentally, like politically, all of the things. Human connection is what remains true. And it's actually what our brains are built off of. And many people, and I'm talking the majority of populations, have been impacted very negatively based on some, child rearing practices, especially in North American Western ideologies, of the cry out method. Just that basic teaching that was given to parents has caused
The cry out. Yes.
and that brain not to be wired.
Oh my gosh.
Actually,
I did that with my daughter. And that's where getting back to just love. Like there's so much rewiring of what love is, right? We hear so much like unconditional love, but with boundaries, right? And I find there's so many people that don't even know what really love feels like because they haven't been given that unconditional, right? Like, so the rewiring with the power of love, just looking at what love is.
In the science of therapy, it's only possible because a person sitting there as the therapist or as the practitioner helping and supporting someone is mirroring to them that they are lovable. is mirroring love to them. Whatever story they bring at them, they are mirroring love back. That is your role as a therapist, because we are mirror neurons too, and you're just helping the person bring love to whatever situation has caused discordance. That is the neuroscience of it. And so we don't have to overcomplicate things, or you don't have to have a PhD and doctorate in order to love.
No, you just have to be practicing it all the time. Yourself.
Love to that came up for you last night, bringing love to whatever it was that felt wounded or not enough, or usually it's a story relating to that, or I was bad and wrong, or I'm the one to blame, I was at fault. Because from 0 to 6, whatever happens that is painful, there isn't yet like a modulator in the brain to realize that there's another person's story. So the child can only internalize that they're bad and wrong and they're at fault. So anyone that has had disease, which is everyone in some form, obviously some are a lot worse than others, but in some form, everyone has had some level of conflict, because we are human beings and our world has come kind of to a heightened stage of that. But when they have internalized a story that they're bad, wrong, not good enough, that they don't matter, it's their fault, that story lives with them. There's just a child that's gotten bigger, and now they're playing that out in their life.
Yeah, because we only know what we know. So there has to be a rewire, and the repetitiveness of that, like, rewiring, right? To continue and be surrounded by people that are energies that are supporting that.
So principle 3 is what everything hinges off of in this podcast. So when we're talking about something, we can remind ourselves and each other, hey, let's bring it back to love and connection and the truth of that in your story, in your pain body. I'm going to be building a new company in 2024. I'm going to have vulnerabilities come up. I'm going to have self-doubts. I'm going to have imposter syndrome coming up. I'm going to have all the other things that humans have when they're out there, and the wounds are, because it's in the nervous system. We're restoring in the nervous system as it happens. You don't just logically go, okay, I'll file that away and know that it's all love and connection. No, because our body's still going to be showing up for the story, and we got to witness it. So our nervous system will bring the story up, and then we witness it and we bring love to it, and it's continual. And that's our work in this lifetime and for a few generations, if we truly want to get our planet back on track. Because it's like a plane, that goes off course. It might be off course this much, and it might have started 500 years ago with some of the imprinting of core beliefs that took us off track. And it's like, oh, it's just a little bit off course. But a plane that's only a little bit off course, 500 years later, we're over here. That's a fact. This is a known fact by trauma experts and social scientists. We're over here. Yeah. So how do we get ourselves back? And this podcast is helping with that, I hope, with some love and connection.
Well, yeah, thank you. And I think that's also comes back to just the fact that where our story is being stored, right? So much of our story in our mind, but where's the story in the heart, right? That's where, like, the mind being the heart, like that's where in Tibetan teachings too, right? Where I'm like, oh, the mind is the heart, the wisdom's there, not here. Yes. Right. So when we rewire, just like you're saying, like, it's rewiring from the heart place, not from this story that keeps being told. And I felt like that in therapy too. Like when I was as a teenager, like, I don't want to keep hearing the story over and over again, right? And repeating it. I need to rewire this.
And that's where the hope lives. Like, what you're bringing is hope, because, okay, we're over here. But a listener could go, well, that's so daunting. I can't even start. That's so hard, but the hope is in the fact that the wisdom is inside of each person. Yeah. And the wisdom of healing and the wisdom of returning to homeostasis, within each person, and the heart, what you're talking about. Therefore, it'll know how to pendulate as you're ready to, and bring you back when you have clear intentions and clear mind to do so. And with those supportive, safe as you do it, because if you're with an abusive, traumatized and traumatizing person, as you're trying to do that, it's actually going to be very discording. As you do that and start to, even in the safety of listening, you may notice that you don't want to be around those people as much, and do those steps to not be around them as much, and creating a more and more safe container for yourself, your family, your community, and building on this language, this common language, so that it becomes normalized. It's very crucial. And so that brings us to principle 4, which is creating that common language around healing to empower listeners to love themselves, hold hope, and grow towards who they want to be.
Yeah, language, right? Our mindfulness, our slowing down, and even just what I really have been learning so much of, just really slowing down and listening more, and the language that's not spoken as well, right? I mean, we're talking about the ones that we speak, but also just those moments where it's just an energy. I always feel like I have to speak a certain way to be heard, often, which is why I really love you and your language. I don't know.
It can validate people. It's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
It can
Yeah.
validate where people are at, but with a new relatable spin on it that like lands for them. And that's why I always say that the power of a circle is wildly understated in our current society, because the power of a circle can do so many amazing things for community cohesion, for family cohesion, for workplace cohesion. It can create the change that people are actually looking for, but they never set the time to actually do it. And that is due to the building of common language, relatability, trust. Common language helps people to feel heard, to feel seen, to have purpose, to have meaning. Someone could have a totally different association of what I intend to say, and that's been something that's happened my entire life because I had savantism in reading and writing. Obviously, my peer group didn't know what the heck I was talking about because my mindscape was already in a totally different place. And I had read hundreds of adult books by the time I was 8 years old, right? And so
Wow.
when I'd say something and I would understand, below the iceberg, what that really meant, I'd have people upset thinking I was saying something totally different.
Right.
And it was a hard and challenging road for me. But I do know that a common language is what builds a community of practice and an aptitude of things. So when we say something, then we unpack what that means. It helps to create new neural pathways. Storytelling has been with all of our ancestors, everyone's ancestors. And it, like, elders do storytelling, or people that are the knowledge holders or storytellers of that community, they do storytelling because as the listener is there, they're building neural pathways. They're building the ability to think that way. And the power of storytelling is to offer that to others. Now, we are still, as a modern society, storytellers, but what are we consuming? Because the lyrics of those songs, the movies, the scripts, the everything that we're consuming is still building those neural pathways.
Totally.
So becoming really conscious of what you're listening to, because you're tracking with that person with their mind. I've been trained a lot in things like shamanism and other healing modalities. And when you're helping someone and you're supporting them, you're guiding them to track their thought processes, and you're going with them. And then you're obviously calling parts of their spirit back that have gone because of a discordance, but you're bringing them to those thoughtscapes. It's the same with so many things. You're guiding them to that. Manipulative marketing strategists, that they're literally taught the psychology of how to manipulate one to feel or think a certain way. And then they're crafted as successful because they're able to do it. Right. And I'm not saying that marketing is wrong and bad at all, but I'm saying that it's a fact. Like, we will go where we're guided to. And so in thoughts and feelings and sensations, and the more there's sensation tied to that thought, the more it stores and imprints, the more it goes into long-term memory banks, the more it goes into your viscera, like your container, your nervous system. So then you're like, oh, why am I craving this donut? Well, that very heightened sensation commercial did all of these things that piqued your interest at a young age, and now it's stored long term. And anytime you felt the presence of your dad around, you associated with that commercial. So when you miss your dad, you crave a donut.
Right.
We have no idea what's really in all that. And that feels like a lot. Well, I could never possibly unimprint everything. No, we can't. Well, we could, but that would take, deep spiritual practice of 25 years and some plant medicine. And some people do choose.
Yeah, interesting what you said, because with that was been my experience, because with language, I actually was drawn with healing to Sanskrit language instead of English, because I also wasn't able to speak like my whole life in English. I didn't have the words, and I find that with my daughter too, my little girl. Like sometimes she doesn't have the right language to express how she's feeling or what it is that she wants to even say. And this is where I hope to also like just touch on languages of other languages, because I really believe that the English language actually, the resonance and it dumbifies, like there's confusion, it's not the original languages, right? Like, and this is where, you talk to First Nations people too, like the water had a song and it had a different, right? And so there's definitely, I have a Polish friend, she's like, oh, just deciphering different parts of what a word actually means, right? So language is just, it's so massive. And I also would say, when you're talking about, because fairy tale, I think Albert Einstein said something about how the language of fairy tales, how that imprints in us and how powerful it is for our wiring. Fairy tales. And I mean, I was trying to talk to a dog last week in language, right? Like, you're suffering. What do you need? Right? Like, language is just, that's with anybody, right? Sometimes it can be, what is it you need? I'm not understanding. And then you have to go to another level of the language, the body language.
Mhm. Well, body language is 80%, 20% is verbal anyways, right? And so you're bang on, right? Like how we show up and we're globally imprinted in different ways, and we're now a global force that's knowledge transferring in new ways. And we don't know what all of the associative language and meaning interpretations are. And so, I mean, that's going to take generations to figure out how we're weaving unity and diversity into one in new ways. We have no idea what life is even going to look like in 5 years, let alone 25 years, And so, but what we can do is anchor some core truths and skills and aptitudes that are, going to fundamentally help, I think, build self-awareness, confirmations of intuition, because people generally have a sense and know, but they've been really derailed from that sense of knowing. When you go to a doctor and you're taught to just listen blindly to the experts, it takes away and disenfranchises a person's ability to discern for themselves. And doctors are amazing and important human beings, and experts are important human beings that have dedicated their life to knowing things. I'm just saying that in a sovereign way, people have this ability to trust their gut instinct that's often shut down, and things like that. And so helping people to activate and remember that, because we also have our ancestors' DNA in us, and that epigenetic switch that turns on when we just know, and to confirm that to one another and validate one another, like, yes, you have had powerful ancestors and they knew what to do in this situation. You are not alone. Your ancestors are literally within you. And that gut feeling to respond in that way or to do that thing is accurate. You don't have to just do what's happening on TV or whatever else it is, or the common script. And we can talk more about like community common scripts throughout the podcast and throughout times when people are sharing their stories.
Yeah, and intuition like is so important, the language of intuition, and how much diet and all that. And I know we'll talk about that. We'll probably have people on the podcast too to talk about that, because it's so important, right? The language of our body. What is our body saying to us? Are you listening? Right? And that's where, I mean, we're in a mental health crisis, and it's like, how do people explain? How do they say I'm in trouble with, like, the other day my daughter's like, oh, you know, that's like murder. Like, it's just the wording, right? And I'm like, you can't say kill so often. You can't say these words. Like, don't say that, because we reuse these words so much that actually are very powerful words. And then we can discount someone saying like, I am suffering. I am feeling like, doing something that's not healthy, you know, and we could just blow it off, be like, oh yeah, I always say that, you know, and it's like, no, what language do I even say now to try to get attention, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if that made sense, but
So
yeah.
you're meaning like the world's inundated, and how do we even get heard if like
Yeah, how do we even get heard? Because there is so much, you know, just in our society of violence and just like in songs and stuff where we get used to saying, you know, words that can be very triggering for other people, or, you know, just, oh, I wish you'd die or something, you know. It's like, don't say that, you know, if someone feels like it's like the boy that cried wolf, right? Fairy tale.
there
Like
is
we
a mental health crisis and there is a lot of convoluted messaging and people maybe don't really know where to go, but they do sense the lighthouses of hope, and hopefully Simply Sacred, you know, this podcast can be a lighthouse of hope that people will feel drawn to because it resonates. But sometimes there's so much distraction and discordance that they can't feel it because their body is so, there's just so much in there, and they're not able to feel even the goodness, or goodness feels wrong and bad.
yeah.
And so, but I believe in creator, and I believe that things will go where they're meant to, and that's the thing.
Faith.
All we can do is hope and try and show up, you know, and like you said, with the mental health crisis, these conversations are so important that they should be had in every community. They should be had everywhere,
Yeah.
all the time. There was a girl that I was aware of in a certain community that was raped and left and got frostbite on her legs, but the community did nothing to talk about rape culture or consent culture. It was actually hidden away,
Well,
the
that
reality of why she was left or what happened before she was left. And actually, it was just spun that she was just drunk and passed out, but that's not true, right? But the inability to have these conversations keeps communities unhealthy.
Totally. Well, that's too, like in the community that I'm in, where just little things where when you know that someone is suffering or someone is struggling, and people will tend to say, oh, that's not my business. It's like, it is your business, it's your community. And how do we, in a gentle way, become that safe
Mm.
space and that container for people to be able to like move through something that's uncomfortable happening in that community, or something that did, right? Like, because
Yeah.
yeah, people are just, it's not my business, it doesn't have to do with me, I don't even know it's like we're all affecting each other. This is where that inner world, outer world, right? Like if that's
And
happening.
leadership doesn't know how to feel and process and the topics and the conversations that are necessary. And that's where leadership needs to have done that inner work themselves and then do it. That's what my song Feel It to Heal It is all about. You know, the lyric, pick up the pace, you got to feel it, pick up the pace so we can heal it. Like we
One thing.
need leaders to do that first so that they can help build the containers for communities. We need
Yeah.
leaders to hurry up and get on the conscious conversations and in the inner world journeys so that we will have healthier communities.
Yes.
Oh, all my
So it is.
relations.
Healthier communities.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Love you.
Love you.